them know I don't have no time for no drama. Misperforming on stage, I'm singing the soca. Yeah, that is life, I can't complain. When things nice, it's felt like rain. This feeling I can't explain. I promise you right now, better days are coming.
Thank you so much for staying with us. We are now joined by President of the Greater Tunapuna Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Melissa Senhouse, to tell us how businesses are coping with COVID-19. What are some of the challenges the Chamber has been experiencing, including crime, and what, of course, are the plans moving ahead in 2022. Good morning to you, Ms. Senhouse. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Avashi, and thank you for having me. Good morning to your viewers, and Happy New Year to you and to your viewers.
How is Tunapuna this morning?
Nice and sunny.
Very nice. So share with us, how have businesses been coping with COVID-19, the spend of consumers and so on? How has that been affecting you all?
Well, Avashi, 2020 and 2021 were very challenging years because of the COVID pandemic and the measures that had to be put into place for to save lives. The lockdowns within the country resulted in a loss of revenue for all the businesses, and resulted in a loss of revenue for the businesses. And the impact of 2020, any cash reserves that the small and micro businesses may have had were depleted. Then we enter 2021 battered and bruised. This, of course, would have impacted our cash flows. And, you still have bills to pay at the end of the day. And then, of course, because it's a worldwide situation, you have, for the businesses who would have had credit sales, your debtors would have been unable to pay you in a timely manner, further exacerbating the situation. Then we know that the highest expense of most organizations is the wage bill. So you had that factor, you had that human resource challenge whereby, businesses had to make some really hard decisions to reduce the staff, whether you want to utilize a vacation, and in some cases, unfortunately, termination of staff. And the thing about it is, for a micro and a small business, you are very familiar with your team, with your team members. You know their parents' names, the names of their children, and you are acutely aware of their financial situation. So when you have to make a decision to separate from a team member because of the pandemic, in order for the company to survive, it now impacts the mental health. So you had, of course, the impact of the mental health of business owners, and then, of course, to their staff and the family. Because you're really caught in a quandary, right? In addition to when you had to separate from staff, one of the other issues you had is, of course, you're now operating with a smaller team, and we are still in a pandemic. So you will still have members who may come into contact with somebody who's COVID positive and have to quarantine, and you're looking at between 14 to 21 days. So now that impacts your service levels.
We haven't been hearing much about mental health, and that one really reached home to me when you tried to explain it just now, because I know Tunapuna is one of those business districts where you have a lot of family owned and operated, as you mentioned, a small, a micro, where you tend to be very close-knit. You see, sometimes I would go to a store in Tunapuna for the past decade or so and see that same attendant. You find that stores, and they try to keep their staff on, see them through life and so on. So, mental health, what can be done?
Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that the Chamber has done was embark on a series of webinars. So in 2020, the first webinar we had was on mental health. And then that extended again into 2021. So that is something that persons really need to focus on: the mental health, self-care, and well-being on the whole. We have from my understanding, a lot of the chamber members have indicated that they have built that into their employee assistance program, where they are allowing actually their team members to receive any counseling that they may need when they have to separate from the organization. And of course, the business owners themselves are reaching out more to psychologists to just try to better cope with the situation.
Yeah, I've heard of, not in Tunapuna, but I've heard about a few business owners who just couldn't cope. They went into depression until, they took care of it themselves, So it's quite unfortunate, and I don't think people realize, business people, yes, you're owing staffers, you're owing the bank, and all this mounting pressure together with the pandemic. The economy doesn't seem to be picking up that much. How is consumer spend? Has it increased a bit?
No, actually it has decreased. From feedback from our members, they have actually indicated that 2020 surprisingly was a relatively better year than 2021, because of course 2021 you started to see the impact of persons being at home, having to reduce income, and then the increase in pricing. So once you have the rise in pricing and reduced income, then of course, persons really have to focus on purchasing the essentials, and everything else becomes a luxury.
So even for store owners, when they go to buy, like even for Christmas, you'd see a plethora of items, all different colors, this, that, the other, chocolates. But we're seeing less of types, brands, assortments, less of the assortments. Do you find that businesses now are also having to make the decision on what do they buy to sell?
Definitely. Because one of the other challenges that we have, actually two of them that will result in this, you have the challenge to obtain foreign exchange, and then also you have the rise and increase in freight. And the situation around the freight is that you end up where the freight is actually costing more than the items within the container. And I mean, by the time you work out your math before the shipment reaches you, at that point, you actually make the decision, what, do I really need to purchase these items? Because when it comes, you're going to sell it for, an increased price. And, if persons don't buy it, then you end up with that stock. So, which of course would impact your cash flow.
Mm-hmm. So, it's quite interesting that you would say that, because now I'm considering an item that I may purchase. I'm paying more in freight than for the actual item.
Yeah.
Have you seen...
I mean, you see that from your general purchases from persons who like to purchase from Amazon, etc. I mean, you might pay $2 for an item, but then by the time it's landed, it's, $200-300 TT, right? So...
I thought that was just me and my bad luck. I didn't realize that it was more expansive. But have y'all seen store closures within the Tunapuna Chamber?
Yes, we have.
Or closures
in
of
the
businesses?
In the latter part of last year, we conducted a survey, and approximately 12% of the businesses that were surveyed were unable to reopen because of cash flow situations.
And what sort of challenges? I mean, we talked about freight, access to foreign exchange. What other challenges do members of the chamber face?
Mm-hmm. Well, So in addition to those different things that were mentioned, of course, we have the situation of flooding and crime, especially recently within the Tunapuna area. We saw an increase in gang-related violence, which of course had members concerned about, it impacting their business, because you don't want a situation where you end up with a wild west on the Eastern Main Road. So that was one of the situations that is one of the challenges that businesses have faced. And what the Greater Tunapuna Chamber has actually done is partner with the Tunapuna Police Station Community Council to establish a business watch group. And what that business watch group really is about, it's basically the business version of a neighborhood watch group, where you have to be vigilant, not a vigilante. So you pay attention, you see what is going on, and if there is any kind of suspicious activity that is taking place, we actually have a network where persons could communicate in real time. So you could actually put the information into that system, so that persons would be aware of what is taking place. Because very rarely, when crime takes place in Tunapuna, let's say a robbery takes place in Tunapuna, very rarely that group will target one business. They may hit, 2 or 3 within that same day. And then, of course, they will go to other areas of the greater Tunapuna. So they might go to Takarigua, they may go to Aruka. So that is one of the things that we are seeking to do as well, to build that out. So everybody would be on the same page and everybody would be able to respond. From the time you see the person walks in, okay, listen, I need to be on my guard and respond accordingly.
Has this initiative reaped any rewards just yet? And would you be able to share some of that?
I will say yes. Recently, one of our members, his business was, he experienced a robbery in his business. And we were able to put video footage within the network. And persons were able to identify the individual, because what happened is the individual actually went to different businesses in Tunapuna to try to sell the product. So we're seeing that it works.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, I understand. And you didn't mention flooding. Flooding was a major challenge. Could you expand a bit on that?
So last year especially, we had a lot of flooding on the Eastern Main Road. It's an every year thing, especially between, at least in the Tunapuna area, especially by the market area there. We also had flooding by the by Baltazar Street, which is where Disco Mart is located. But admittedly, a big drain has been installed, it's in the completion process right now by the Food Masters area. So the true test would be this year.
When the drain is completed and let's just say there's heavy rainfall, then we would be able to determine if that was in fact the solution. Okay.
Exactly.
So flooding, we talked about crime, access to foreign exchange. Would you care to tell us a little bit about the chamber? Because I didn't realize that you all extended as far as Takarigua.
Yes, so actually the name, the Greater Tunapuna Chamber, is that we are not only, we don't only represent the businesses within Tunapuna. Yes, it was started by businessmen within the Tunapuna area, but our boundaries actually expand to Mount Lambert in the west, Golden Grove Road in Aruka to the east, the Waiama River south, and the Northern Range to the north.
And how many members do you have, and the cross-section of businesses and so on?
So we have in excess of 150 members, and most of our businesses comprise of wholesale retailers and professional individuals such as accountants, lawyers, and doctors.
Does the chamber or its members, do you all have a position on the safe zone policy?
Well, so yes. Chatting with the majority of the members, we have in excess of 75% of the members that are in agreement with the safe zone policy, right? We have, looking at the statistics, you're seeing that 48% of the population is vaccinated. You have 86% of persons being hospitalized being unvaccinated. 94% of the deaths are among the unvaccinated persons. And I mean, whilst the Honorable Prime Minister indicated that he does not intend to have any further lockdowns, what we do know is that the hospitals are overwhelmed. And once the hospitals are overwhelmed, what you would have taken place is when persons go to the hospital for some other reason other than COVID, they just have a regular illness and they need to get that immediate assistance. It is now delayed further because of COVID, right? And sometimes it's to the detriment of that person. So what we're seeing from the figures is that the vaccination helps in this regard, in reducing the hospitalization and reducing the burden. So owing to that, we, most of the members, and we are in agreement with the expansion of the safe zone policy. The only challenge, though, is that you have the situation where the vaccination cards are paper cards that could be easily duplicated. So therefore, that directly impacts the integrity of the safe zone, because anybody could go and duplicate a card. So the digitalization of that system is very important in order to just secure the integrity of that program. We've also noticed that you have the government has implemented, well, of course, we have implemented the safe zones within the service industry, the bars and the restaurants. And what some of the members have expressed concern about is the fact that for them to be able to operate and service their customers as well as offer the dine-in service, they basically had to be vaccinated and have their staff vaccinated. And here it is, you have the government, who's the largest employer, dealing with service, and they have not implemented a similar policy. So in that regard, members are in agreement with it.
But of course, when the Prime Minister made this announcement about the safe zone policy, the expansion to include public buildings, public sector and so on, he did sort of hint that he would hope that private sector would join in. And not just the private sector safe zones, but the rest of the private sector. Businesses within the Tunapuna Chamber, have they considered doing the same? And how in that case will you encourage your staff to be vaccinated?
I'm sorry. You sound a little distorted there.
Oh, are you hearing me any better now? You hearing me any better? Are you hearing us any better, Ms. Senhouse?
No.
Oh,
no, I'm not.
I'm not. Well, we're hearing you very clearly. So I'm gonna attempt one more time to ask you. Can you try to put the device on speaker mode to see if that helps a bit? So, Ms. Senhouse, are you hearing any better now? I just wanted to get this final question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Great. So it's just this final question. The Prime Minister, when he made the announcement, he of course suggested that he would expect private sector to join in to the safe zone policy, sort of voluntarily. He did start with the service industries and so on, expanded it to the public sector. But when he made that announcement, he did say eventually he would expect private sector to be on board with this policy. How does the rest of the private sector feel in the Tunapuna Chamber? That's aside from the service industry, restaurants and bars that you would have mentioned before. How do they feel about having safe zone policies for just normal stores, storefronts and so on?
Mm-hmm. So in answer to that question, some of the members were comfortable with their staff being vaccinated. However, to narrow it down, or I should say to tighten it up to a situation where only vaccinated persons could come to purchase, in that regard, businesses were very hesitant about that, simply because you're already operating in a depressed market, and then here it is, you have a situation where you basically have to discriminate who you sell.
So you would be on board, but just not as it relates to consumers, those entering.
Yes.
Great. And are you able to tell us what is the vaccination status within the chamber? What percentage of coverage is there?
Over 80%.
Great. Melissa Senhouse, President of the Greater Tunapuna Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, there's more of Morning Edition after the break. Stay with us.
Yeah, that is life, I can't complain.